So, I've been meaning to do this episode for a while. In actuality, this very episode was originally supposed to be about Ingleba, the wound. But I decided against it because I've not seen the movie. But now imagine me going ahead with the episode even though I have not seen the movie and doing what 98% of black men in this country have done.
Entitling themselves to having an authoritative opinion about a movie that they've never seen.
Attention shoppers, all edges are now buy two and get the scalp free. Thank you for shopping at Hair Anonymous. Yes, praise God.
Now, being the crisis averter extraordinaire that I am, I decided to turn my guilt for not watching the movie into a mini research project of sorts. I started becoming interested in questions like, with Ingleba having gone through the drama of unnecessary persecution, who now has the privilege or the means or the will to go see the movie? What kind of person now would still be interested in watching a film like Ingleba? Other than being a bigot, what are some of the reasons for people not to tune into the movie? Most importantly, who is truly responsible for providing or not providing Ingleba and other queer narratives with the access and visibility that is granted to other films? It is high time that we have a frank conversation about the relationship South African mass media has with queerness. To preamble this episode, I think it is important that I say the following.
There's gonna come a moment when you are not gonna like me. You're gonna be highly, highly pissed off with me. And you are gonna wanna fight me. I give you permission to do all of that. Because in the end, I'm gonna win.
And so, now that it's clear to you all that I'm gonna win, let the dragging begin. South African mass media has an irresponsibly poor relationship with queer folk, and there are two faulty areas within this relationship that I'd like to speak about today. The first is the manner in which South African mass media has constructed the ideal queer being, especially in the last 20 to 30 years. The second is the manner in which and through which South African mass media engages issues of representation, especially because representation is currently of, global concern. So how has South African mass media constructed the ideal queer being over the last 20 to 30 years? For starters, 20 to 30 years ago marked the transition era in this country, from a racist white nationalist regime to a more liberal, all-inclusive, kumbaya dispensation of freedom. And so the transition period was an opportunity for marginalized identities to finally be recognized as worthy citizens in this country. Because of democracy, South African mass media had to learn how to function within a neoliberal, free market capitalist society, which meant that institutions within South African mass media were mandated to now visibilize people who were previously marginalized and portray those people as a significant part of the Rainbow Nation project and narrative. Advertising and audience numbers are a fundamental part in keeping South African mass media's economy going. And in the context where there has been little progress in terms of who owns the economic and epistemic means of production, i.e. who's got the economic means to keep your establishment afloat, as well as who's got the power to push editorial agendas. This information is important to highlight because it becomes a key part in the construction of the ideal queer and the ideal queer narrative on a commercial scale, especially in today's context. Now, in order to lure audiences and parties that have got the shmoney into the idea of a worthy queer being in a democratic context, South African mass media did the following. They first constructed this being as polarizingly gay. So already any other understandings or framings of gayness or queerness have immediately been cancelled. But now there's a race problem because the strong majority of this country is black. So the construction of a gay black figure is not only necessary, that figure has to be constructed in a way that has the power to influence and represent as many aspects of free life in South Africa as possible. So this gay black figure has to demonstrate a meaningful contribution to society in order to seek the economic, social, and political validation as a worthy citizen in this country. So South African mass media decides to construct this gay black figure to only exist meaningfully in the context of the arts, especially in entertainment. And I must also mention that mass media is also responsible for constructing the rules and the boundaries and the ways of being and performing within the entertainment realm as well. But there's also another interesting element to this, right? And it's something that I like to call Boyz to Galz nostalgia. So just based on my, living experience being exposed to both, township life and rural life, as well as just my interest in how human beings, really, I have noticed that black people have a particular fascination with queer people, especially effeminate gay boys and effeminate gay men. So a huge portion of my childhood and teenage years was spent hood hopping. Deep Kloof and Shawelo in Soweto, Sunnyside Kopitoli, Mnambithi Mashu, Enyu Jemeni, Mlazi in KZN. I swear to God, not only was there a guarantee to be a gay boy in the vicinity,
I mean, if that gay boy wasn't me, you know what I'm saying?
there was always a set of exclusive terms reserved to refer to these gay boys. But the one I remember the most was Boyz to Galz. As in, yes, boys to men, but Boyz to Galz. And so upon reflection, I discovered that, gay boys and men in these spaces are often romanticized. Because for various complex reasons, they are socially palatable. But the moment they hit puberty, or change physically, or decide to discover themselves as sexual or romantic human beings, then they move from being community faves to community terrorists. And when I look at the way this country has embraced figures like, Bougie, Amstel, Somizi, Lasizwe, it reminds me of how the fixation and the romanticization of gay boys and gay men in this country is an important part of social nostalgia. And it is this very romanticization and fixation and nostalgia with gay boys that oils the machine that is South African mass media, because we are the audience. So here we are. On the one hand, we have a particular queer being that's been constructed by South African mass media for various reasons that I've just discussed. And on the other hand, you have this fixational nostalgia of this queer being that is happening at a grassroots level of the socio-economic and cultural sphere. And these two hands work together to perpetuate the same set of narratives about the same kind of queer being. The collusion that is going on here has three implications for queerness in this country. The first implication is the tokenization and the totalization of queer narratives and identities in this country. Because South African mass media and society in general have been conditioned to seeing a certain kind of queer figure tell a certain kind of story over and over, society is then led to believe that other forms of queerness and other queer narratives are illegitimate or are deviant. Somizi, sorry to pick on you, is a wonderful example of what I'm talking about. And of course, he has character, he has talent, he's got staying power, he's got roots, genealogical roots in the South African entertainment industry. And it is these very qualities about him that make him the exception to many of the rules whenever we do have these kinds of conversations. But he is important to bring up as an example because he nonetheless epitomizes exactly what I'm talking about. He's in the entertainment realm, he's got character, he's loved by the masses. He performs his socio-economic power in various ways that involve consumption. Somizi has been idolized to the point where he has been weaved into our colloquial languages and cultures. Most importantly, he represents democracy in ways that are not necessarily or offensively provocative. Somizi and identities and narratives like his have been tokenized to the point where he is the main, if not the only reference in terms of what it means to be A, truly gay, and B, what it means to be truly gay and being a gay that matters in this country. The second implication has to do with the evident exclusion of other queer identities that have emerged over the recent years. We're now living in a post-2010 era, and what has come with that era is the expansion of social media platforms, personal brandings, etc., etc., etc. And with that came the emergence of queer narratives and identities that are diverse and different. Diverse and different from what was perpetuated as normal expectations of how a queer person should perform their identities. And while some of those different and diverse queer identities have been marginally absorbed into contemporary society for various reasons, most of those queer beings and identities still experience backlash and exclusion. The most notable example of this is the Inxeba debacle. Society, mass media, institutions like the Film and Publication Board had the power to frame the film in a way that delegitimized queer experiences, especially in the realms of culture. But they also pathologized these very queer existences in stereotypical ways, i.e. framing the queer being as a hypersexual deviant. And so indeed, the Inxeba debacle was a demonstration of how mass media and society collude with one another to revoke queer beings of their social, cultural, economic, political, and epistemic legitimacy and citizenship. The third and final implication that I'd like to chat about is something that plays out in mass media that I'd like to call Kloster activism. South African mass media in the Department of Representation has really proven itself as incompetent and incapable of engaging queer identities and narratives and experiences in ways that are meaningful, in ways that are impactful, but also in ways that matter. And because of this incapability, South African mass media, I guess, in an attempt to brand itself as concerned and caring, creates the buzzword activism. Whether it is said in speech or visuals, whether it is implied or explicit, many, if not most queers that mass media lends itself to are labeled activists. And so it is this activism narrative that is strategically used by South African mass media to pacify a conservative society like ours. In this country, being an activist is the only effective way that queer people can be considered as useful. And the dangers of this activist narrative is that it perpetuates this idea of queer people being a monolithic group of people who are A, always fighting, and B, always fighting for the same thing. The other dangers of this activist narrative is that people are genuinely being given platforms in the capacity of activists when they are not. And it truly stresses me out, because in this day and age where people are given big platforms within the mass media simply because they have like social media clout, it only furthers the misunderstandings and misrepresentations and miseducations about queerdom in this country. And so, in conclusion, I would like to say that this episode was not made to harm or to injure anybody's identity or career or shmoney or living experience. I made this episode because I believe deeply in holding people and institutions and systems accountable for the ways in which queer people continue to be shortchanged in this country. And so with that being said, if you liked this episode, like, subscribe, share, and comment. Please comment. I really would love to hear your thoughts on this one. If you did not like it, guess what? You're gonna do the same thing. Thank you guys so much. Mwah.